This week we're back in the Gospel of Mark after spending the last 5 weeks in the Gospel of John. Mark is always a bit of a shock when you get back into it after being in John for a while, because in John, everybody knows the deal. They know who Jesus is, they know what the message is, and they're always trying to disprove it. Whereas Mark, we still, even in the seventh chapter, the only people who know who Jesus is, obviously Jesus, us as readers, and any demon or any person who is mentally ill that they encounter seems to have this insight, but the average person does not. So the Gospel of Mark is still very much a discovery. Who is this Jesus? What's going on? Where is this messenger taking us? And he is a teacher. He's leading them on a journey. Now, ultimately, in the Gospel of Mark, we know that he's going to end up in Jerusalem. Jerusalem was symbolic of a traditional religion, a traditional belief system that oftentimes did not have much in common with what was going on in the other regions. So we assume that the temple worship cult, essentially, that was practiced in Jerusalem was also practiced throughout Judea and throughout Galilee. And it's only partially true. They had the expectation that they would go and visit several times a year, but the actual living of their faith, the expressions, the teaching, the way their faith was lived by the time Jesus came along, it was different in various regions. So we start off the Gospel of Mark, and Jesus and his buddies are getting together for a meal. And we're told right away that the leaders of the temple had come up from Jerusalem. Now, it seems like a throwaway kind of line, but this is so significant that Jesus was such a threat at this point in time. His teachings were such a threat to the temple establishment that they came out of the city all the way up. That means they would have had to pass through Samaria, which they were not friends with, and all the way up to into Galilee, where Jesus and his followers were. So that tells us how scared they were of what Jesus was teaching. Now, not necessarily the actual content of his teaching so much as how that content could potentially raise the Hebrew people up against the Roman invaders. And the last thing the leaders in the temple wanted was to have another rebellion against the Romans. The last one came out of Galilee, and it did not go well. It was a tax revolt, and it was not well received. It's lucky at that point in time that Rome didn't come in with its full force. Now, we have the benefit of history of knowing that just a few decades after all of this story that Mark is telling us happened, the Romans did come in force, and there was horrible things, and the temple was destroyed. So these people were not wrong. These leaders were not wrong to feel the threat of the Romans, but they missed the point of what was actually going on with Jesus' ministry. So they come out of Jerusalem, they come up, and the first thing they see, according to this story with Mark, is that not all of Jesus' followers are doing a ritual hand washing. Now, anything with a ritual immediately suggests elaborate, and there's no way of really knowing how elaborate this ceremony was expected to be. But the Hebrew people were known to be a tradition that washed themselves quite frequently in a ritualistic way. In fact, all Semitic people have that as part of their culture. So the Pharisees, the scribes, those who came out of Jerusalem, immediately attacked Jesus' followers for not doing the faith properly. To them, that was a genuine criticism. To Jesus, not so much. He criticized them as leaders right away as saying, is this what you think the tradition is? This what you think the faith is? This is what following God is to you? And they're spouting, this is the tradition. We have to keep with traditions. And Jesus essentially said the tradition is not the problem. Assuming that you can only have the tradition is the problem. Now, that's a problem we still have to this day in the church. So many times I've gone into communities, and this phrase that I absolutely detest is we've always done it this way. It's designed to shut down conversation and change and trying something new. And the irony is, the chances are you haven't always done it that way. That's just what you remember from your childhood and assume that's the way it's done. But this boogeyman, almost this horrible thing that we put on the backs of faithful people, tradition, you know, in the musical Fiddler on the Roof, which I absolutely adore, that's one of the things that Tevye fights against the entire time while he still loves. And that's the kind of relationship we're supposed to have, the sense that tradition is always with us, but it should not hold us back from doing new things and getting to the heart of what we really believe. Tevye, go watch the musical. He dealt with the fiddler the entire time representing tradition. Jesus was having none of it. Jesus told them, it's not how we prepare food. It's not how we put things in our mouth. It's not how we clean ourselves. That is the real problem. The problem is what comes out of us. And of course, the Pharisees didn't really get it. Jesus' followers really didn't get it. And the people around him really didn't get it. And quite frankly, 2,000 years later, we're not really getting it either. What Jesus was looking at was that tradition, the way we're expected to do things, and we all come with tradition. It's part of the human condition that there's comfort in that. There's a sense of belonging. There's an identity in that. But if that tradition, that identity is stifling, is not allowing for any flexibility, it's a problem. And this is the message Jesus was trying to get over to all those folks all those years ago. When we work only with our tradition, our faith is deadened because God does not expect us to follow a particular method of behavior outside of loving each other. It doesn't matter how we dress. It doesn't matter the order we have for worship. It doesn't matter which direction our buildings are facing. It doesn't matter the language we say and the body language that goes with it. All of those are human creations. All of them have value. All of them add to our sense of wonder and worship and presence and community. But if they exclude people, they're not worth it. Jesus went on to explain to these folks that it's not what we put into our mouths, it's not how we do things that makes us dirty or makes us unclean, actually more accurately. It is what comes out of us. It is our character. It is our behavior. It is the way we speak to people. Jesus even gives a list, sexual immorality, murder, fighting. There's a number of others that he brings up. All of these are ways that we are already defiled as people. And that is across the human condition. And there is no ritual that is going to make that better. There is no ritual that will stop that from being the human condition. The only way to change that is to change ourselves, to change our thought process, to change our behavior, to change our sense of interaction, how we place our values, how we live those values. Tradition can be wonderful, especially around a holiday season. It's the thing that makes us feel like we're part of something. But it can also be that thing that stops us from realizing what we really should be about. Our tradition, the Hebrew tradition, the Christian tradition, the Jewish tradition, whatever tradition we're part of, all of that is secondhand. It is not the focus of Jesus. It's not the focus of God. We have to make sure that what we bring to the table, regardless of how well we've cleaned our hands, is love and acceptance and a sense of justice and a desire for equity even more than equality. These are the things that we're taught through our faith that are important. Traditions, they're just on the side. We should not be judging each other for how we process the love that God has shown us and how we choose to express it, how we choose to share it with our communities. Don't let human laws and expectations trump God's desire for how we behave. That's the message Jesus is trying to get. There's no special hidden value in this. There's no desire to get an eye-opening message that will wow us all. It's just a matter of looking at ourselves and paying a really close attention to how we are presenting ourselves, how we are living our lives. Are we doing things the way we know God wants us to do? Or are we letting human laws and archaic expectations and deadening sense of behavioral norms stop us from really feeling the transformative power of love that Jesus brings to us? Are we letting any of that stop who we are called to be as followers of Christ? If any of those things are stopping our true confession and belief in God, our behavior that we are supposed to be showing others, then they've got to go. They are not doing us any favors anymore. They are holding us back from being the people God has called us to be. It's not how we live, how we eat, what we eat, that is going to make us bad people. It is how we decide we want to live in the world. And we have that choice. Are we going to be people that are defiled? Or are we going to be people that express and share the love that God has shown for us?